Alright, hello and welcome everyone to the Devstream 185 breakdown. This is the Devstream as the precursor to our first big update of the year, and it is going to be an absolutely tremendous update as we are going to be going over. With that being said, I do want to note here quickly, because I'm not going to do a separate breakdown for it, there was also a Soulframe Devstream, and there was a bunch of things to talk about with that are like some just more improvements to the game and things that they're changing. But the big interesting thing that I wanted to talk about with the Soulframe Devstream is that they teased what is probably going to be the Founders program for Soulframe, and I found it to be incredibly interesting. So to quickly talk about that, the thing that they're playing with, the idea that they're playing with is that people who are founders in Soulframe would be able to take their founders items and help players who aren't buying founders or aren't founders build those weapons, but with like their personal like account mark on them whenever they essentially like pass down those weapons to other players, which I think is supremely interesting. If you're interested in that, go check out the Soulframe Discord. It is mentioned briefly by Steve, but I think it's an incredibly interesting idea and a good one at that. So I just wanted to talk about that really briefly. Soulframe is shaping up to be really cool, and you can expect me to probably cover it a little bit more whenever we get to Preludes 9, which seems to be fast approaching. With that out of the way, let's talk about the Devstream. There's a lot. First and foremost, the anniversary is upcoming. This is an ephemera, not a Sindana, and it looks very nice in game. They showed up like with various different cosmetics and such, mostly on Arthur. Looks good. Going to be neat. All the other stuff for the anniversary is returning. That's going to be all the deck skins, all of the deck's weapons. All the things are here and returning for the anniversary, and that is also going to be in March, so great. But quickly moving past that, because we have too much to talk about, TECHROT ENCORE and what's going to be in it. First and foremost, we have our different Gemini Warframes. That is going to be Temple, Saren, Frost, and Nova, who are Flare, Minerva, Vesemir, and Kara, respectively, who you can all see here. This is a short trailer that they showed off that I think is very, very cool. I will just mute that here. It does have a cool song that goes with it. Of course, Periphery is going to be providing a bunch of music and samples and such, both for Temple and also just for the update in general, which all sounds great from what they showed and what is in this trailer here. Personally, you can see Frost here. They all look phenomenal. I think Frost is actually probably my favorite of the group, which I would not have expected, but he looks absolutely stellar, and we have just really, really good things coming for the Gemini. Notable stuff here, and it was one that got a negative reaction, as I was expecting, on the Devstream. None of these protos are going to be romanceable. They are going to have like their own different stories that do not involve romancing them, which many people are instantly disappointed by. Personally, I get it, and I don't think that they need to be romanceable every time whenever they make Geminis, and it might actually be more interesting for not every single Gemini they add to be romanceable. But this looks great. I think that all the different protos look stellar, and I cannot wait for those to be in the game. I will be purchasing them all immediately, and they're probably going to be my main fashions for most of those Warframes at the very least. Maybe not in the long run, but at least for a while. Anyway, though, that is the new protos that we're getting. With those protos, they're going to be added to a new area, which is going to be a bar in the mall. For Minerva and Vesemir, they are going to be selling furniture stuffs and a bunch of decorations. You're going to have Temple, Flare, who is going to be selling all of like their gear, the special weapon that they're going to be launching with their signature weapon, and also the stuff to build a temple is going to be from Flare. And then Kara is going to be running a new EDA-style mode, which is just essentially an EDA 2. This is at a higher level than the EDA that we have now. It's at level 500-ish, which is an increase. And is also going to have another system on it to actually make it easier, which is going to involve like a consumable sticker system, which should be interesting to engage with. But this is basically going to be the 1999 flavored EDA instead of the Entrati Labs flavored EDA that we currently have. And from what we know, we're going to still use the Netracell charges, though, in order to do the mode. So instead of doing the 3 Netras and 1 EDA that we do now, it seems like it'll be 2 different EDAs and then 1 Netracell as our total weekly stuff to do once this launches. This is coming with 3 new Arcanes, which are actually available for a currency, so I'm not sure if they're actually going to drop from the mission itself. And these are Arcane Escapist, which doesn't appear to be great right now, but it is an interesting one that seems like a future design space thing could take advantage of this. Arcane Hotshot, which is 300% weapon critical chance for 10 seconds, but will refresh every time you inflict heat status with abilities. This can be used on a wide variety of different things, so this will probably be incredibly useful, especially for Warframes like Mesa, for example, is probably instantly going to grab this and use this over Arcane Avenger, which will be a huge buff for her for some reason. And then Arcane Universal Fallout, which kind of remains to be seen. This effect has a lot of potential. I do think that the frequency percent here, which is not finalized, does need to probably be at least 5% at max rank. Otherwise, it's not looking to be like too high potential. But if that final rank 5 is at least 5%, then it looks like it's probably going to be pretty good and could see use on a variety of different frames, maybe even frames that aren't necessarily always going to be proccing radiation outside of their weapons. So really cool stuff here. Because I kind of glanced over it, there's a new defense remix mode. That's how we're going to be farming the currency to get Temple. Also, with this update, as we've gone over before, defense waves are going to be reduced to 3 from 5. So anything where you would need to do defense is now going to be only 3 waves instead of those full 5 waves, which also means that things like whenever you would do your weekly Archons, if you needed to do 10 waves of defense, that'll be reduced to 6. So great stuff there. Defense is just becoming less of a slog because they are just kind of long. Is going to be very, very nice. Moving on. Coda are releasing. We've talked about the Coda a bunch in the past. TLDR, they're coming out. There was some showing off of the ephemeras that they're coming with. I think most of these ephemeras look very cool. The heart one is really not for me, but every other one here looks really, really neat, and I can't wait to customize a bunch of Warframes with them. So I will be farming relentlessly to get all of these ephemera pretty much at launch. And then we have a bunch of slides of a ton of new stuff. So augments. We have 4 new augments coming. We have the Wisp Soulgate augment, the Omakuji augment for Kome, the Crucible Blast augment for Corvex, and then the Arc Sphere augment for Gyre. Of these, just on reading them and on what little we've seen so far, the Wisp one actually seems kind of good and could be a DPS build potentially for Wisp, so that's very exciting. The Omakuji augment is kind of maybe too specific and doesn't seem like it's going to be fantastic for Kome, but it'll at least be something to try, and it might be easy to make room for. Crucible Blast augment is a thing that on reading, I just would have to test it myself. It reads interesting, but whether or not that translates to good remains to be seen. It at least seems potentially good, so I'll be curious to see how that actually plays out whenever that launches. Then we have the Arc Sphere augment for Gyre. This kind of just like doubles down into her being more about guns than being about her abilities, which if you are more about guns than you are about abilities on your Gyre, you will be into. If not, you probably will not use it if you're trying to DPS with your abilities. So it seems like kind of just a different play style availability for Gyre, which is probably going to be good on its own. Moving on, we have a bunch of slides of quality of life improvements, including some really heavy hitters. So to start, new player improvements, shortened and reworked the star chart path, including relevant junctions to the second dream quest. This means there's going to be a faster path to the second dream. Probably also means that missions that could get in the way of early game progression, like Hijack for new players, just really unpopulated nodes that could be very difficult for someone with little to no mods, probably being moved out of the way of the new player's path and just being able to really like quickly get you to the second dream, probably out of like you'll do the usual big quests that we kind of have at the beginning because you have Saya's, and then you go right into Fortuna, and then you go right into Deimos, probably really shortcutting the area where I always say people get lost in Warframe's path. And instead we'll be making it much, much quicker to get you to that second dream quest, which is probably overall going to be a big improvement. But bigger than that as an improvement is that a loner necromech will be provided during the final stage of the new war, which means new players no longer need to farm a necromech, which is just tremendous. That is an incredible boon to all new players, as this part of the game was very poorly tutorialized, and without help, many players would probably stop playing at that specific juncture, especially given like a lot of people having the original experience of farming the necromech, which was ages long. Obviously it's better now, but this just gets it completely out of the way. I was personally of the opinion that if they did not do this, what needed to happen was like bespoke tutorials for both mining and fishing, and specifically putting people on the path to get the resources necessary currently for the necromech. But this is also a wonderful solution. I do think that they're probably, if they're going to make people do fishing or mining or that stuff somewhere in the future, there does definitely need to be specific in-game tutorials for that stuff, as it's very confusing for new players. But this totally gets that out of the way, and none of that stuff is required for the MSQ anymore with this change, which is stellar. On top of that, they are removing high-level crafting materials when crafting an Arcwing, and Arcwing launcher segment is going to be delivered upon completion of the Arcwing quest, which means you're no longer going to need to get it out of clans, which is very, very good. So reducing the requirements for that and making it so that Arcwing launcher segment is much more accessible is going to improve people's experience with the open worlds just in general. This is an incredible list of new player changes for quality of life. I think these will be just perfectly received and just great overall. It's possible that this top one could go awry, but I really, really doubt it considering the type of quality that we've been getting from DE, especially lately. Quality of life stuff besides that, they're improving some things about Captura, which they didn't really get specific about, but I love Captura improvements as someone who's a content creator. That's great for me. Simplified audio options. This is actually kind of misinformation a little bit because they simplified the top level of audio options, but they're actually adding way more audio options. Whenever you right click into the audio options, there's a bunch of different categories that break out into all kinds of things, like specifically whether or not you're going to hear Gemini dialogue, whether or not you're going to hear ambient noise versus gun sound effects, like all kinds of like really bespoke different audio options are going to be available, which I absolutely love to see. Just tell me which bar moves the how you can hear rare crates, and I'll be very happy. So yeah, that's super good. Seems like a stellar improvement. And also a stellar improvement, prorated bundles. For anyone who doesn't know what this means, it's actually better than what this actually means, what these two words mean together. They actually made it better than this. But the basic TLDR about what a prorated bundle is if, for example, you were to buy Rhino. Let's say you just bought Rhino for Platinum, which is like 300 plat or some insane amount. Don't do that. But if you did such a thing, if you spent that Platinum on Rhino, and then you decided that you wanted to buy the Wrecking Rhino pack, which contains Rhino and a bunch of other options. Say the Wrecking Rhino pack is 600 Platinum. Don't buy it, by the way. That was my like new player 12 years ago mistake. Don't purchase that thing. But if you wanted to buy the Wrecking Rhino pack after you already bought Rhino, right now that price wouldn't change at all. But what it's going to do now is it's going to reduce the price by the amount of Platinum that you've already spent on things in the bundle. And in addition to that, as Rebecca clarified on stream, if you go and farm things that are in the bundle, that will also reduce the price of the bundle, which is just phenomenal. So if you go and farm Rhino and then just have Rhino, it will actually reduce the cost of that pack if you wanted to get it, which is just fantastic, especially for things like what Stalker pack. And just all of that stuff is just an incredible improvement. Doing the prorated bundle stuff is just phenomenal and going to be a huge positive for everyone that is ever looking to spend Platinum on anything. This also means that this fixes a thing with the heirlooms people could run into, where you might want the heirloom like bundle, but you purchased like just the skin by itself. This will reduce that pack cost down and allow you to much more easily get the full bundles you probably want. So absolutely fantastic. We love to see it. Also, Deviri Paradox and the Hex Quest are both going to be replayable, which is great. We All Live Together cinematic will be added as a replay for the Narmerized Fortuna. I don't know if that means that it's going to switch Fortuna back to blue Fortuna. I know many people, myself included, prefer blue Fortuna over the red one that we currently have. So we'll see how that goes. The Valent Swap adapters, which we talked about last Devstream, those are going to be added into Eleanor's store. So those are going to be interesting. It wasn't clear whether or not those are going to be like you'll install it and then can free swap the element. That's what we were told last Devstream, but the way that it read on the Devstream wasn't quite that. So we're curious to see how that actually works out. They're doing a thing with face-off, the PvP face-off, where there's going to be a squad-wide boost, which is interesting to see. They said that basically they want it for matchmaking purposes to incentivize players to go do it at certain times, basically like whenever it's not populated, basically give everyone a buff that makes it more rewarding to do. For me personally, if you like have a thing where it's like, oh, hey, it hit, I don't know, let's say 8 p.m., send all players a message where like their next round of face-off PvP gives 10 times like Conclave rep, I would go straight to the mode and I would run it. Like, if you give me like, oh, go do one run of this and it'll give you 10 times Conclave reps, so you get like, 7 to 10,000 Conclave rep, I would go run it immediately. So I think that has a lot of potential. That like incentive and like it being limited time based, I think is very interesting and probably a good way to get people to play more of that mode. The Awakening tutorial is getting a lighting facelift, which I don't really personally think it needs. I think it already looks great, but we love to see it. And then Ancient Protectors are basically being nerfed to be worse at giving everything overguard, and there's going to be more ways to counteract them. This was a thing that was like a complaint from a number of different people. It's especially prevalent in people who are like more casual or like using off-meta builds. But like, this wasn't a huge problem for someone who uses like the builds that I put up, but it could be an issue, and it was definitely an issue going forward, as there was a previous fix that they made to this, which for anyone who did not catch it, in Cascade, the Thrax Ghosts could for a time get overguard, and that made them basically unkillable at extremely high levels because you must fight them with your operator. That's already been fixed, thankfully, but this was the thing causing it, which was horrifically bad. But that being changed is a positive, especially on the more casual side. And then this year is just kind of a roundup of all of the quality of life stuff they talked about in the previous Devstream, which is a whole Devstream worth of quality of life, again, that we're also getting. And then moving on. we can talk about the Temple stuff. So Temple's abilities are as such. They looked really good on the Devstream. I think that they have a lot of potential. They have a metronome that just dings back and forth, and whenever it is in the middle, if you cast an ability, you get a bonus. It's also double efficiency. You get 50% efficiency straight out if you are casting it on the metronome. So abilities all being cheaper from that is a very good thing. It means you're probably going to be a little bit more greedy with strength if you are good at hitting that metronome on beat. The first ability is Flame Pillars. When you do them on beat, they double. They seem to do pretty decent damage, and they were showing it on Steel Path, like base Steel Path enemies, so that's very promising. The 2 is a Speaker's attack that basically makes enemies much more crit vulnerable, and then that is increased on beat as well. For the third ability, it's kind of 2 things. First of all, it's a buff that adds heat damage to you and allies, and its duration increases anytime you do a tempo. So anytime you hit that tempo, the duration will increase, and the heat buff will also go up. So potentially a huge amount of damage there. Also, while you're casting this, you will be invulnerable, and it will heal you. So provided that we get a good amount of health, which it looked like we were max rank on stream with 505 health. If that is completely vitality-less, Archon Vitality on top of that should make that pretty good for you just doing like a decent just health tanking that you're going to be able to do at the majority of levels. And then otherwise, of course, you'll just fall back on shield gating whenever that's not working at very, very high levels. And then for the fourth ability is an Exalted Flamethrower Guitar. While you're aiming with this, there's an interesting functionality, kind of a new design space for DE to look at, which is that aiming changes your abilities to viral, magnetic, cold, and corrosive. And what that means is that you'll be aiming the guitar, and if you hit the abilities while you're aiming, you'll basically shoot out those elements from the guitar to be able to essentially like prime all the enemies with either viral, magnetic, cold, or corrosive, which is really cool. I think that is really interesting and definitely a cool design space to be moving into. And this is an Exalted weapon, so it is going to be fully moddable and part of the Exalted rework that we're about to talk extensively about. Overall, for Temple, barring some maybe slightly questionable survivability, I think everything here looks incredibly good. And the survivability is just like, that's based on just what the actual stats are going to be whenever they launch. I think they look great. I think their Gemini looks great. And I hope that survivability is decently solid, because if it is, then it looks like we got a really good Warframe on our hands, especially with some of the other tools that we're going to be adding, like that Hotshot Arcane, that is almost assuredly going to be what Temple is utilizing. Moving on, we have an Exalted rework. There's some points here to break down, but we have an entire dev workshop to talk about. Now, there's a lot in this dev workshop, so we're just going to go over the little points. There was an immediate reaction on stream that this was going to be a nerf, and it's not. Plain and simple, it's not going to be a nerf. If you just look at like the math presented here and what things are going to be, this is going to be a buff to all of these Warframes. At the absolute worst, it will be a very, very hyper minor, small, like couple thousand damage nerf. But those things that it will maybe receive a couple thousand damage nerf will be doing millions of damage, so it will hardly matter. So for that, we're getting Arcane slots on Exalted weapons. Exilus mods are going to be on all of the Exalteds as well. So you're going to have Exilus mods and Exalteds. Everything that has a stance, all of the melees that have a stance are going to have a stance that is giving them capacity now. So it's going to be cheaper to forma all of these different Warframes, which is great. And the big thing to talk about is that there's going to be also a bunch of mods that are not available on these weapons that are going to be added. So you're going to get your Blood Rush, Body Count, Gladiator Rush. All those types of things are going to be added here. Amalgam Organ Shatter. All these mods that all these Exalteds couldn't use are going to be added to them, which is incredibly good to see. Weeping Wounds also is going to be a very, very big and important one, because we're also getting the Arcane slots on all of these, which means that Influence is going to be on the table for a good number of them. For that, also, big change for Excalibur and Baruch specifically. They will now gain melee combo counter and trigger Tennokai. So that's huge, because it means that building combo as both of those Warframes is going to be very easy, which means you're going to be able to get Blood Rush online as the main thing that they're going to be doing, and it's just going to work out really well. The thing that is here as a nerf is that Baruch is going to go from 50% crit down to 35. Oh no, who cares? He gets Blood Rush. The TLDR on this is that he'll have more crit than ever before, because he's going to get Blood Rush. So if you're worried about his damage being lower, you don't need to worry about his damage being lower. Also, even if Baruch's damage was going to be lower, he does like 70 million damage slam attacks, and if that became 60 million, you would receive the exact same results even at level cap. So I really don't think there's any room to complain about Baruch here. With that, We have some new exalted weapons for the pseudo-exalteds. So Ash is getting one, first and foremost. There's a bunch to talk about with Ash at the bottom here. I think there's a lot of interesting potential going forward. But I mainly want to talk about Atlas, Gara, and Cora, because there are the things that have been perceived as a nerf here. First and foremost, for Atlas, Atlas is going to have an increase in crit chance from 5 to 35, and status chance from 5 to 15, both of which, like, that's stellar. This is the exact increase that we used to get from stat sticking on an Incarnate, which means that the performance is going to be pretty much exactly the same. Landslide retains its unique combo counter mechanic instead of using traditional melee combo, and then he's also going to get the ability combo changes that we're going to talk about in a moment, which are going to be incredibly important to what we're going to talk about with the next two, which is going to be Gara and Cora. I'm going to simplify talking about this. I talked about this for a while post Devstream, which I streamed live over on twitch.tv/Brozime. But important things to note here is that on Gara, Shattered Lash now has a 20% crit chance, up from 0, and a 30% status chance, up from 0. And its base damage has been reduced from 800 to 400. Now, this is the thing that everyone is reading as a nerf. But there are important considerations for this that actually mean that this is not a nerf at all. The important consideration for this is that currently on live, whenever you build up regular melee combo, you get a 3.75 multiplier to the damage of your pseudo-exalted weapons, like Gara. Whenever you have 12x combo, you get a 3.75 multiplier to your damage. And that is very, very important to your total damage output. That is being changed so that you get a 12 times damage bonus. So that's quite a lot more than 3.75. So they're reducing the base damage of both Gara and also Cora's first abilities to half of what it currently is. But in effect, because of the ability combo counter changes, it's actually more like an increase of plus 50% damage over what their base is. Because you're getting essentially what would have been in the past a 6x damage multiplication instead of that 3.75. Which, interestingly for Gara in specific, because she was using the Tenet weapons in the past, which are a 60% bonus, actually mathematically works out to be completely identical in terms of total multiplier. So I think that this has been very well considered by Pablo and crew for this to remain exceedingly good and not really be changed functionally at all on Gara, besides having an increase from 0 to 20 and 30% respectively to critical chance and status chance, which means just actually swinging her one into enemies is going to be very powerful. So this is all stellar, and I think there will be no problems here. Basically, the TLDR is that Gara will just do the same thing she does now, but just with completely no need for any stat sticking, which is tremendously useful. And for Cora, that damage change is the same, and we wouldn't use like a Tenet weapon on her, and she would get a bunch of Incarnate bonuses and all this stuff. However, she is losing some damage here, which is effectively a 50% increase to damage whenever it max combo, and she's going to be able to build that combo just from using her one a couple of times, because you're going to gain 20 combo per one you cast, which is quite a lot. And she's going to be able to be an influence Warframe, which is insane. In addition to that, there are some range changes in here where all of these pseudo-exalteds are actually starting at a 2.8 meter basic range, and then that is going to be modded with ability range on the melee mods as well as on your Warframe, which means that Cora, currently, who is capped at 10 meters from her ability modding, will instead also gain a 2.8 base, which means you go up to 12.8, and then after primed reach, you would actually be over 15 meter AoE on her one. And if you know how the fucking area of a circle works, especially a sphere, that is a tremendous increase to the killing power of Cora, which means she's probably going to be like a nuking influence build that is going to be absurd, as opposed to the like current a couple enemies get like killed for a much higher damage. It's probably going to be a more compounding influence giant AoE, kill everyone that's ever existed in your sphere of influence. So yeah, that's going to be insanely good. The thing that is notable about Atlas, of course, these big buffs, because of the way the ability combo counter is going to be changed to work with mods like body count, and also almost assuredly be worked with like arcane dexterity still. That will likely still also work. If not, Naramon is going to work on all these things as confirmed lower in the workshop. Atlas is looking to be stronger than he has literally ever been in the past, which is tremendous. So all of these Warframes seem incredible. I'm no longer worried at all about the pseudo-exalted Warframes. This all seems great, and I hope everything goes through as we would think it would, given these incredible notes. So basically, every single Warframe that uses an exalted weapon, like a real exalted weapon, is getting buffed. Just inarguably, they are definitely being buffed because obviously that includes all of like the gun ones like Mesa and Ivara and Cyto 9. All of them are getting buffed just objectively. And with these pseudo-exalteds, the worst case scenario seems to be Gara might stay the same, but she's already an A+ tier Warframe, so I personally can't see a problem with that. So yeah, incredible stuff there. Talking about the Ashe changes, because Ashe is becoming an exalted Warframe, this is a pretty good roundup. So first and foremost, Shuriken is going to 750 damage. I do wonder if this damage is going to be affected by the moddable exalted that Ashe is going to have, because if so, this could potentially be a pretty good damage output ability, which would be really nice to see. But otherwise, they're just increasing the amount of Shuriken, and they're making it build melee combo counter, which is all fine. Smokescreen is getting a 50% increase to its base duration, which is going to make this much, much less annoying. We might actually no longer need, 300% duration in order to be nice and comfortable on Ashe. Probably more like 200% is going to be just fine now, as those are the same thing from the old to the new. So that should be quite good for Smokescreen. And in addition to that, Teleport, the Fatal Teleport Augment is now a part of Teleport, and you'll automatically do finishers with a finisher bonus, which is hopefully modifiable by Strength. And the Fatal Teleport Augment is now changed to Quickened Teleport, which is executing a target, gives you a parkour velocity, and the duration is doubled with a Mercy Kill. Which that one doesn't matter so much, but finisher kills performed by Ashe will extend Smokescreen's duration. Mercy Kills will reset Smokescreen duration. So this is potentially very, very good because finisher kills are the thing that Bladestorm does. And provided that the functionality is maintained, Ashe's third ability can actually be used to join in on the Bladestorm. So with that being a possibility, it's likely that you'd be able to go invisible, join into your own Bladestorm, and get a big extension on how long your Smokescreen will last. So it's possible you can use your 4 as a way to extend your 2, which would be incredible to see. So I think that the loop there has a lot of potential. With that, Bladestorm is going to be separately moddable, which is going to be a tremendous buff to it. Now, notable with this is a lot of people look at this and they don't like what they see on the next part we're going to talk about, but I'm going to tell you why it's a huge buff. So, Bladestorm is now considered a dagger, allowing you to equip weapon-specific mods like Covert Lethality instantly. That's quite a good buff because Covert Lethality is a finisher damage increaser. Bladestorm has a critical chance of 5% and a critical multiplier of 1 and a status chance of 5. So all of these numbers used to be 0, so those are big buffs. Also, it means that things that increase critical chance and status chance will now increase this properly, which means there's a lot of potential for you to use things like a Darza Kavats, Wrathful Advance, the critical multiplier buffer from your Sentinel. There's a lot of room for activities in the ability to change these stats at all, and it cannot be understated that there is a lot of potential here. I know these numbers seem low, but you have to remember that Bladestorm as a baseline does finisher damage, which is a special damage type that ignores resistances. So there's a lot here. A lot of people saw this and were like, numbers too low. Let me tell you, numbers are not too low here. Additionally, there are Bladestorm changes where you're going to be able to mark targets in an increased radius around the circle, which is great because, it was pretty tight beforehand. And the much more important change, Bladestorm can now mark targets only once each. The clones will not do 3 attacks. They will just do 1 attack, and it will do all of the damage that you would normally get. That is stellar and means you're not going to be doing this anymore with your mouse, just swiping it back and forth to get all the marks on the enemies, which was incredibly annoying. So that is a very big increase to the kind of flow of how you're going to be going through on Ashe. So incredible stuff. TLDR on this is that these changes seem phenomenal. The Gemini look great. I'm excited for the Coda. The new cosmetics look fantastic. The new Arcanes seem to have a good amount of potential. At least 2 of the 3 Escapist seems like a thing that's maybe going to be good in the future, but maybe not good at launch. Which is more than fine with me. 2 out of 3 is not bad, turns out. And yeah, lots of great stuff. The anniversary is coming. New Warframes are coming. We have the new Gemini. We got new game modes. You got 2 new game modes and ton of quality of life. I will note that after this update, after of course I farmed all of the things that are going to be needed to farmed and updated all the builds that are going to be needed updated with this, I will be doing a new free to play through, because this is a huge amount of new player experience, quality of life stuff that I definitely need to check out for myself. Hugely excited. Hugely excited. Seems stellar. Tell me if I missed anything in the comments, guys. I can't imagine, with my explanation, of course, of how nothing here seems to be a nerf in any way, anyone could really be mad about this. It seems like just a complete win for everybody involved. But I'd be curious if you guys see something that I don't that seems to be bad. But yeah, that's going to do it This is a Devstream breakdown. If you guys are interested in checking out Monster Hunter Wilds, I'm going to be streaming it with my partner over on twitch.tv/Brozime, so maybe come hang out. If you have Warframe questions, that's just fine while I'm streaming other games. So I'm going to be over there. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Goodbye! Hey everybody, it's time to thank the patrons that are hanging around and supporting the channel. So, start with that. The $10 patrons are Atheon, Alex Farnham, Arbiter Daydream, Barkus, Benuven, Plotomatic, Brutus Salazar, Candelathra, Blob World, Dylan Dworsky, Athrain, James Harthorn, JC4 Science, Josh, Luzanth, Vicotel, Michta, Nerve, Ruby, Sanyu, Sharp247, The Coupon of Death, Waifu Wars, Wodad01, and Zeraphir. Also, thanks, of course, to all of the other patrons for supporting the channel. It is much appreciated. It's a little sneak peek on what we're getting into. There's going to be a lot more of these kind of big re-reviews of weapon types and their new builds and stuff, as things changed a lot at the end of last year. And of course, there's also planned new free-to-play before we get into any more big updates. So look forward to that.